Hi, I'm Mark David Gerson. Welcome to Stories and Reflections, where my stories are also yours. If you're a regular listener to Stories and Reflections, I have to apologize for missing last week. I had surgery, not the major kind, fortunately. That was the week before, and I just wasn't up for recording another episode. Now, that's one reason. You may not notice the other reason, at least not right away. And that's because if you're listening on your usual podcasting app, there's a good chance you're only hearing this week's episode, not seeing it. Seeing it? That's right. As of this week, I'm adding video to the podcast. You'll be able to watch it on YouTube, of course, but if I get things organized in time, you can watch this episode on Spotify and potentially on other podcast apps that support video. Now, if it hasn't happened already, it should happen in time for next week's episode. Now, I don't know for sure because until I record and edit this episode, I can't take any next steps when it comes to video distribution. And of course, I'm only recording it now. Filming it now, I guess I should say. Before I go on, let's get the health thing out of the way. The surgery was routine and fairly minor. At the same time, any time you're cut open and a doctor messes around with your insides, it's invasive, and healing and recovery time is needed. As one of my Facebook friends pointed out in the days after the surgery when I was complaining that the recovery was taking too long, the surgeons, of course, they don't just unzip you and zip you back up again. Like every other kind of healing, it's a process and it takes time. The good news is that in this moment of filming, just a few days before this episode is released, I'm doing much, much better. Every day, in fact, especially over the past several days, I'm hugely better. Now, I'll know more later today, not today, the day I'm recording this, but today, the day you see this, which I'm hoping will be Tuesday. And that's when I have my follow-up appointment with my surgeon. But I have no reason to believe that things aren't progressing exactly as they should be. And for those of you who knew about the surgery and sent prayers and good wishes to me for a speedy recovery, thank you. I truly appreciate it. I can't pat here because I'll pat the mic. One more thing about the surgery. It took place on President's Day, which also happened to be the day before the Chinese New Year, the day before a new moon, and 2 days before the start of Lent. And by the way, February 17th was the start of the Chinese Year of the Fire Horse. And while I wasn't born in the year of the Fire Horse, I was born in the year of the horse. So it's my year. And I also discovered that February 17th was something called Who Shall I Be Day and My Way Day. I have no idea what those last two are or where they come from, but it strikes me as particularly significant to me personally that surgery to correct a situation that was so limiting, so constricting, and so restricting should be followed by a day of such significance around new beginnings, not to mention around movement. Think of those horses, galloping horses, fire horses. And that brings me to this video, my first podcast episode since the surgery, my first podcast episode in the Chinese Year of the Horse, my year. If Stories and Reflections itself marked a new beginning of sorts for me, then expanding into video feels like the next level. I could maybe say that the audio podcast was me tiptoeing into the new beginning, and the video podcast has thrown me onto a horse and has me galloping into that new beginning. And maybe that's why initially I felt so much resistance around doing Stories and Reflections as video. It's funny, when I was getting ready to release Acts of Surrender, my first memoir, and that would have been about a dozen years ago, I was hugely resistant. Let's call it what it was. I was scared. I was terrified. On one hand, that didn't make any sense. Just about every story I told in that book, and I told lots, was a story I had told at least once before. And most of them probably I had told many, many times, usually in the context of a writing workshop or coaching session I was facilitating. You see, I was telling those stories in order to make a point. I was telling them as teaching stories. I was framing them in a way that put me in some measure of control over how they would be received. But when my muse urged me to write a memoir, and I was, again, hugely resistant, The instruction I got was to simply tell stories. No context, no framing, no direct teaching. In other words, no control. I would put stories out there, and you, the reader, would read, interpret, and maybe even judge them, and me. And again, the entire process, once my story was told, would be out of my control. I felt incredibly vulnerable. There's a line in Acts of Surrender that goes like this: walk the earth naked, clothed only in your truth. Actually, it's from an earlier book, although one that wasn't published until after Acts of Surrender. It was originally from another memoir, Dialogues with the Divine, Encounters with My Wisest Self. And one of the reasons Dialogues wasn't published earlier was that it was an even scarier book to put out into the world. Dialogues with the Divine is more journal sharing than storytelling, and the encounters mentioned in the subtitle were far more raw than anything I would later write in Acts of Surrender. Walk the earth naked, clothed only in your truth. It's all about vulnerability. It's all about letting ourselves be seen as who we are at our core. No masks, no hiding. I haven't read Dialogues in quite a few years now, and I thought it might be interesting for me to revisit the context in line of how I'm feeling today about vulnerability and about the vulnerability of putting out these videos. Interestingly, this excerpt is from February 3rd, 1997. It was around the same time this year, February 12th to be precise, that I realized that I needed to expand from audio only into a video podcast. And here's what I wrote that day, 29 years ago. You are in the midst of your awakening, your early spring. Your winter ends, as you have sensed. This is a season of coming out, of speaking out. Step out into the world and let the world see you in all your eloquence, in all your wisdom, in all your power, in all your fear, in all your vulnerability. Walk the earth naked, clothed only in your truth, not your certainty, but your truth. For your truth will free you if you let it. Your truth will protect you if you let it. Funny thing about vulnerability. Each of my 6 books for writers, all of my 9 downloadable courses, and all 4 of my Way of the Fool books include a call to be vulnerable. In the voice of the muse, I checked this out before I started recording. In the voice of the muse answering the call to write, the words vulnerable, vulnerability, or vulnerabilities show up 22 times. They show up 16 times in The Way of the Fool. And as annoying as it can be to accept, we teach what we need to learn. I teach what I need to learn. And it's something I have learned. After childhood and teen years and through my 20s, when I was largely shut down emotionally and showed as little of myself, my true self, to the world, not to mention to myself, as I could, I do now let myself be vulnerable. I've done it in all my books, fiction as well as nonfiction. I do it when I teach. I even did it in those earlier audio-only podcasts. But here's another thing about vulnerability. It's like a dance of the 7 veils, a slow striptease as we remove veil after veil and mask after mask. For me, I guess, the next veil is showing my face as I tell you my stories. Logically, it shouldn't be a big deal. After all, like with Acts of Surrender, many of the stories I'm telling I have told before. But here's the thing. I've told them in print, or I've told them in a teaching context. And even if I can't fully discern the difference between those and this, now and then, there is a difference. Certainly there is, to my frightened 5-year-old self. And that's, of course, why I have to do it. Video, I mean. I spent too many years, decades, letting fear limit, constrict, and restrict my life. I used that phrase a bit ago when I was talking about my surgery. The surgery was for a hernia, and that hernia absolutely limited, constricted, and restricted my life. It restricted my movement, and that's what fear does. It restricts our movement. It constricts our lives. It forces unnatural limitations on us. And that's why, again, it feels so significant that I was freed from my hernia and all those limitations, all those constrictions, and all those restrictions the day before the start of the Chinese year, the Chinese New Year, the year of the horse, my year. So, vulnerability. When we refuse to let ourselves be seen, often even by ourselves, we are reacting from fear, fear of attack, fear of judgment. Now, those fears can be real. We may well be judged. We may even be attacked. The thing, though, about those who judge and attack us is that they are even more scared than we are. They judge and attack us because we're pushing their buttons, because we are doing what they cannot allow themselves to do, because we are daring to do and be what they dare not do and be. Yet when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in the world, and that includes in our writing, if we're writers, when we walk the earth clothed only in our truth, we give others permission to see themselves, to be themselves, to let themselves be seen as who they are, not as who others think they should be. And as we free ourselves of others' expectations and judgments, we free others to do likewise. And the fewer people in hiding there are, the freer we all become. And so step number 5 in my book, The Way of the Fool, is, perhaps not surprisingly, be vulnerable. And this is one of the things that I write in that book. And this is, here's the book, The Way of the Fool. So under step number 5 that says be vulnerable, it says, share your pain and your passion. Share your dreams and desires. Share your missteps and mistakes. Share your flaws and imperfections. Share your joys. Share your secrets. Share your humanity. Be vulnerable. That's what makes you real. That's what makes you interesting. That's what makes you human. What connects you with others. What invites others to connect with you. Start by opening your heart to yourself. Continue by letting that inner openness, honesty, and authenticity move out into the world, infusing every moment of your life. You are the light of the world. So shine your light into the world and be the fool that you are. After all, the book is called The Way of the Fool. In the end, that's what our stories do. They connect us with each other at a human level, heart to heart. Because it's at that level where differences of age, race, gender, culture, background, sexual orientation, job, profession, nationality, zip code, and neighborhood all vanish. When we connect from a place of authenticity, when we share the songs of our soul, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, when we lift our veils and shed our masks, when we tell our stories unfiltered by fear, when we walk the earth clothed only in the truth of our heart, we change the world. And so let's change the world together. Thanks for joining me for Stories and Reflections today. I hope you found moments in my stories that touched something in yours. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And for more of my stories and help telling yours, check out my books at markdavidgerson.com or from online booksellers worldwide. Until next time, don't forget that you're a storyteller too, and keep telling your stories. The intro and outro music for today's episode is Heartwarming by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons.